Hey guys, I am excited to talk to you today about the Constitution because we need to talk about the Constitution. Why do we have a Constitution? It's a little piece of paper. Who cares? I went to dinner the other day with some friends of mine, and one of my friends who tends toward the liberal side of the spectrum asked me, why do we even care whether or not our federal government follows the Constitution? Like, why is that such a big deal? Why do you make such a big deal out of it? And I thought, thanks for asking, because I'm ready to tell you. I've written about this, but I'm going to tell you in this video, and hopefully this will explain a couple things for you. So let's get theoretical. Why do we have government in the first place? Based on theorists like Locke, Hobbes, and Montesquieu, we have government to confine and protect our private property and ourselves from each other, right? If we didn't, we'd have a right to any and everything, and that means that I could come violate you, or you could violate me or my property, and there really would be no repercussions for that because we don't have any law that we're following, and therefore there's nothing to stop that from happening, right? All right, so we want government because government comes in and says, no, you cannot do that. I'm going to protect you from each other. Think about it this way. If you have a house and I have a house, there's nothing to stop you from coming to take my house unless there's a legal ramification for that. Government comes in and says, no, this is my house. You can't come and take it. That's why we have government, theoretically. Given that, why would we have a constitution then? A constitution is a law outside of government, right? Because what is to stop government from coming in and taking my house, right? I've got government to stop you from taking my house, but what's to stop government from taking my house? Because government's sure got a lot more power than you do, and there's nothing to stop government from coming to take my house because it's made up of the same corrupt people that government was created to govern in the first place, right? So given that, we need something that's outside of government that's going to confine government's power so that government doesn't abuse its power. Because if there's nothing outside of government's power, if government is the source of power, if government has the final say about what is right and what is wrong, or about what government can or cannot do, that can be scary, right? That's what's happened throughout history with most governments. So a king has complete power, complete arbitrary power. And when I say arbitrary, what do I mean? So let me read you this definition. Arbitrary means depending on will or discretion, not governed by any fixed rules, as an arbitrary decision or an arbitrary punishment. Arbitrary power is most easily established on the ruins of liberty abused by licentiousness. Woo, that's some stuff there. Despotic, absolute in power, having no external control, as an arbitrary prince or government. Okay, so a king with arbitrary power can arbitrarily decide one day, not based on anything. He's not confined by anything. He is the final source of law. So he can just arbitrarily decide one day to behead you, right? He doesn't have to have a justification for that. There's no law confining him. He can just do that. Or he can decide that maybe people of a certain race are no longer allowed in the country and then kill them all. There's nothing to stop him from doing that. Why? Because he is the final source of law. Why would there be something to stop him? There is nothing to stop him because, well, he represents the law and he is the law. Therefore, he can do whatever he wants, right? That is arbitrary, though, and we don't want arbitrary power. Because arbitrary power very literally is in juxtaposition to liberty. Okay, it is the opposite of liberty. You cannot have arbitrary power that exists and also have liberty that exists. All right, the Constitution is that external control to our federal government because the Constitution says our federal government cannot come and take our house. Does that make sense? It's really a lot more simple than you might think. Our government's power does not come from nothing. Our government is not the final source of power. Our government is not the ultimate source of authority. Actually, the Constitution is, which is why the Constitution is called the supreme law of the land. It governs our government, and our government governs us. Let that sink in a second. Let's take it a step further. We create government to protect us and our private property from each other, okay? But we create the Constitution to protect us and our private property from government, right? Because if we don't have something stopping government from abusing us and taking our house, then that government's going to do that. That just is the way human nature works. So we need something outside of government, confining government, saying that government can only do this much. And the reason is because if government's given more than this, it's going to abuse its power, right? Founders had very little confidence in human nature. They did not think that people were innately good. Therefore, putting them in a position of power was one of the most dangerous things they could do. So they had to figure out a way to confine those in power so that those in power didn't end up abusing the power that they had. So they created a constitution. Now, a constitution confines that power and says you can only make laws that fit within this little range of power. And if you make laws outside of that, you violated the Constitution, and the people will hold you accountable, as will the other branches of government, and stop that from happening, right? So the Constitution is very limited. It gives a very limited number of powers to the federal government, meaning that the rest of the powers are left to the states. The states know their own people better. They know their own economy better. The federal government is just there for a very select few reasons. And okay, I really want to say this in a way that you get this because it's really important. It doesn't matter if you're liberal or you're conservative. It doesn't really matter if you're Democrat or Republican. Here's the kicker. Our government derives its power from the Constitution. So everything it does, the reason it has the ability to do it is because the Constitution says it can. So it's not arbitrary. There is an external control confining the power that it has. Okay, as soon as the federal government begins to do things that are outside of those confines, it is now getting its power from nothing, right? So if the federal government does something that the Constitution does not say it can do, where is it getting the power to do what it's doing then? And the answer is, if it's not from the Constitution, it's from nowhere, right? And if it's from nowhere, then the power is limitless because it is arbitrary. Does that make sense? I really want you to get this because it's fundamental and the reason that you need to know what the Constitution says so that you can really hold your government accountable when it begins to do this. And it does it all the time at this point, which is frightening as all get out. But I do think it's important that we know that it's happening in order to start calling them out on it, right? So as soon as they break that boundary of the Constitution, that power is now arbitrary. It is now limitless. That's what happens. That's scary. It's not a good thing. Right? When I explained that to my friends, you know what? They got it. Even my more liberal friend, she got it. She said, well, it makes sense. I understand why. So this is why it's important for all of us to keep each other informed and to pay attention to what government's doing. Unfortunately, at this point, 99% of the laws the government passes are not within the confines of the Constitution. That's how it is, which is a really big problem. Huge problem. Now, we still throw around the term the Constitution. So the Constitution still has some level of respect, some level of reverence. But I kind of want to throw up in my mouth every time one of our politicians mentions the constitutionality of something and then say, sorry, every single thing you're debating and talking about at this point is outside of the confines of the Constitution. And if you watch this second video that I'm posting, you'll see what I'm talking about because I define for you guys what Congress is allowed to do and what Congress is not allowed to do. And you'll realize how much of what Congress does is not constitutional. It's mind-blowing. It truly is mind-blowing. I don't understand how they have the ability and the power at this point to do everything that they're doing, and nobody's calling them out on it. Even the most conservative constitutional members of Congress are still passing laws that are nowhere in the Constitution for them to be able to do. This is where we need to start, people. We have to start at the basics. What does the Constitution say? That's it. Then let's go from there. That's my fight for liberty, because without law, there is no liberty. That's just a basic fact. If we don't have law, we have chaos. It's a state of war. So watch my next video and learn a little bit more about what the Constitution says that Congress is or is not allowed to do. It's fascinating stuff, people. Thank you guys. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful weekend, and I hope that you subscribe to my blog or subscribe to my YouTube channel. All right, bye.